Hello, this is Matthew Maddock for Photomad.com. I'm here with the Sony A7 and I'm going to do a quick run through of the features on the A7 and some of the things that I really like and some of the things that annoy me. I think we'll start in the menus here. If I go into menu, you can see here it's the DSLR style menu, and for me there's just far too many of them. You've got the camera settings, and then which can be customized. These are all settings that get saved in the customized settings, and then you have another set of settings. As you can see here, there's 6 pages of those, and it is quite nice to be able to customize lots of things, but sometimes it's a bit too much. Then you have the Wi-Fi settings, or the wireless settings, because this camera has NFC as well. Something I really like about this camera, and one of the reasons I picked it was that. You've got the applications. These are applications you can download into the camera, because you can connect it to your Wi-Fi hotspot. The only ones I've got are the smart remote control, because nothing else yet has been updated to work with the A7, but there are some cool apps, and they're probably becoming time-lapse apps and things like that. If we go back into the menu, then we've got this play menu, all fairly standard stuff, and we've got a suitcase menu. Well, I think it's a suitcase, but don't ask me what suitcase has got to do with photography. And we've got various settings in here. We can set it to the tile menu like the next, but I don't know why you'd want to do that really. I'll just run through these so you can see the settings here. That's where the format is. If anybody wants to know, it's in the suitcase on page 5. The option that I use the most in the menu is hidden right away there. One thing you can't do, which Fuji have just introducing to their X series cameras, is to be able to change the file name, which I find really handy. The other thing, which neither this nor the Fuji do, is allow you to put any copyright information in. The only way you can do that, well, I do it, is by putting it as an import function on Lightroom, but it's nice to have it in camera. Let's just run back through these menus so you can have a look down them again. And there's quite a lot of them. You can see here you can change the image size, aspect ratio of the image, 16:9. I know quite a few people who will probably use this for video and may want to shoot stills in 16:9 so they can go natively into their video. Various JPEG and RAW options. Panorama. The panorama in this is surprisingly good actually, possibly better than the Fuji, and I also like the fact that you don't have to do a really wide panorama. You can record video in AVC HD or MP4, and there's all your video settings in there. This is the UK version, so we've got 50 and 25 instead of 60 and 30. And 60 and 30 just isn't an option on here if you want to use it, unless you go and buy the US version. We've got the drive modes, continuous shooting, speed priority, which means it shoots faster frames per second but doesn't auto expose or focus between frames. Self timer, continuous self timer will take 3 or 5 images. Bracketing, white balance bracketing. You got all the bracketing options on there. I just use it in single focus. Now this is one of the annoying things about the Sony. It's just jumped me out of the menu. I was going through the menu settings and I set one and it's jumped out of the menu, but it doesn't do that with all of the settings. It's got flash mode here, although the camera doesn't have an onboard flash. It will pass these settings on to their TTL flashes. So it jumped me out of the menu again, but it doesn't do that in every setting. We've got the focusing modes here, standard things. DMF now, I'm yet to find exactly what that means. I think it's autofocus with manual override, but Sony's menu for the A7 is so awful, it doesn't actually explain any of these things. And jump me out of the menu again. Focus area, this is quite handy. You can have the wide angle, which just looks at everything and picks whatever it thinks is best. Zone focusing, center focusing, or I quite like this one, the flexible spot, where you can adjust where it's focusing. Again, I'm going to go back into the menu, and you can have a small flexible spot, a medium one or a large one. The small one I find is probably a little bit too small unless you're doing critical focus. The medium's just about right for most things. So I need to choose that. There we go. Focus setting basically just allows you to choose the point. Can you see what I mean about the menus when I wrote in my first review? It's really annoying. Sometimes it jumps you out and sometimes it doesn't, and you never quite know what's going on. It's got auto ISO. There's no minimum shutter speed, but you can set the ISO to right up to 25,600 on auto, and some of the other cameras limit the highest auto. So I don't mind it being on 6400. It won't go below its native 100 in auto, although in manual ISO settings you can bring it down to 50. And what I quite like about this ISO menu is it's got all the little jumps in between. Instead of it goes 100, 200, 400, you can actually jump between, which is quite nice. Let's go back to auto. Metering mode, typical multi-center spot. This A7 is probably the best Sony for metering I've had. The Nexes I had always tended to overexpose a bit, especially when you get a bright sky, but this one actually does really well. And I was shooting in a dark room with a sunlight coming through and just hitting my little girl, and it actually exposed for her and left the background dark without me having to put any exposure compensation in, and that was in multi-metering mode where you'd expect it to get confused, so it did really well. White balance, got all the settings here. If you, let me try and figure this out. If you press white balance there and press across again to white balance, then you can then set a manual white balance, which is handy at times. Set that back to auto. So it's jumping me out of the menu again. Oh, DRO. This is Sony's sort of fake D-range optimizer, their HDR. I don't like it because it just tends to come with some strange effects and reduces the contrast of the scene. If you want to do that, you can do it afterwards in Lightroom. Creative styles, which are there. Okay, you can see there's quite a lot. Sunset, some of these, I mean, I know they're perhaps a little bit amateurish, but some of them actually work quite well. Sunset is a nice one, and I quite like the autumn leaves because it does really punch up those leaves. Black and whites, I love the black and whites out of these. And you can see here we can adjust in camera the contrast and the sharpness for each option. Now I like it neutral, and This produces some of the nicest black and white straight out of the camera of any camera I've had. I tend to leave this in standard mode because I like to do things in Lightroom afterwards. I shoot flat and do things in Lightroom. Zoom is a digital zoom. Not sure why it's in here. I don't know if it's on when it's on auto mode. Let's just try that. Nope. So I don't know why that's in there. I know on the RX10, sorry, you can manually set the you can set a digital zoom on it, but this one, again, lack of manual instructions means I don't really know when that works. Long exposure, I always turn that off. High noise reduction, now Sony's are pretty awful at high ISO. Their JPEG settings just absolutely destroy images, so you set it to low. I mean, on low it's not too bad. On normal you're just going to get horrible mushy pictures. You can turn it to off, but low's not too bad for your JPEGs on here. Lock on AF, that's, I believe, if you have the LEA3 or LEA4 adapter. Smile, face detect. I got it on face detection just because I find that handy, and in here you can register faces. So I put in like my wife and my little girl, and it'll prioritize their faces in a scene. When you've got a child jumping around in the screen, that's surprisingly handy. Soft skin effect, again, it's something I wouldn't use. Auto framing, now this is for somebody like my wife who wouldn't necessarily frame a photograph perfectly, and it'll take the picture and then crop it to what it thinks is the best looking image. These are all turned off because they're not on the thing. Steady shot is the optical stabilization in the lens. The kit lens has optical stabilization. Color space, these are video modes that I've never used yet, so I can't comment on them. Memory is on the top here. We have 2 memory positions. This is where you save those options. So you save into one of 2 memory slots. I don't want to do that because I have my memory set up. Now you see I pressed memory to go back and then it stayed in the menus, but on the other ones it jumps out. We've got zebra which is a highlight warning and mostly used by video guys, I believe. I would suggest probably setting it to 100 or 100 plus, because otherwise it just gets annoying. It is quite handy, and if we have a look here, if I try and overexpose, you'll see that zebra effect there. It just warns you live of any highlights that are blown out. It's quite handy. Manual focus assist, so you get the zoom or the peaking. If I set this to manual focus, that button there, you can see we get the zoom in there, and when it's zoomed in you also get peaking on it. I don't know if you can see it there because I've got it set to quite a low level. Okay, that one. So many buttons on here, I forget which ones I've assigned to which things. Grid lines, I tend to like rule of third grid lines. It's handy not only for the rule of thirds but to get me things level. Audio display in video, so if we go into video mode here, you can see there's a live display of the video sound, which is very handy for a lot of people. And on the side here you've got microphone inputs and headphone out, so you can monitor the sound as you go. You can adjust the sound volume and you can assign that to one of these dials or buttons. So as you I don't know if you can do it as you're recording, but you can set the audio level. Auto review is just a review of the picture. I said it's 2 seconds. I would prefer one if it was 1 second. Just a quick peek. Display button, so we can set all the different screens on the menu or in the Finder. So these are the ones it scrolls through as you press the display button. And you can set different ones for the Finder, and I'm going to set them all on so I can go through them all. So if I press display, we have nothing on the screen apart from the very basics. This part of the screen is just used for displaying the settings. We go through, we then get live histogram, the level, which does a level up and down and side to side, the DSLR style screen, and you can see that can stay on, and the viewfinder can have the live view on if you want, so you've got both on there. And this basic kind of almost next style, I like to run it with, you can have one with all the options as well. Typical Sony, they show you absolutely everything and it all gets in the way. I like to run it like that just so that it's easy. You can get a nice clear view of what you're seeing. Okay, let's keep going through the menus because there are a lot of them. Peaking level, you can set the peaking colour. I just use white because I'm used to it now from the Sonys. Exposure guide, live view display, this is something that is a little bit annoying. If you set this, if you have the black and white option on, it'll display the black and white on the screen. But what it also does, if I have it in manual mode, if I'm shooting flash, I need to turn ISO on to say 100. If I'm shooting flash and I'm shooting at say 160th f16, all I get is a completely black screen because it's doing a live view preview of what the image will look like. Now I can turn that off in the menu. If you turn that off, now I'll get an auto gain view of the image so I can actually see what I'm doing. But then when I switch to black and white mode, I've got memory recall 2 on black and white, I don't get black and white, I get a colour image. So I then have to go back in and turn that on so I get the black and white image. Would have been nice if they just split those two options up. So it would work a bit better for me because I do quite a bit of stuff, flash work, and having to go in and switch that all the time is a bit frustrating. Okay, phase detector, if you turn that on, you'll see here that's the area of the sensor that has the phase detection sensors on it. So if you focus in that area in bright light, it will be quicker. I turn it off because it's just a distraction, and once you know where it is, you know where it is. Pre-AF, don't ask me what that means. If you're using manual lenses, you need to turn this release without shutter on. AF with shutter, this gives you, I normally have this off, but I had it on just because I was doing the demo on the focusing. If you have that off, you can then, I have this center button here set to the AF, and then the shutter is just a shutter. On this A7, it's very difficult to feel the point between half pressing and a full shutter press, and you often end up firing the shutter when all you meant to do was half press to focus. So I split it up into like a back focus DSLR system. I'm just used to doing that and it works for me. Auto exposure lock with shutter, again that's a similar thing. You can set auto exposure to one of the buttons and then hold it and fix it, or you can toggle it on one of the buttons. There's so many options, it's not true. Electronic front curtain, where you want that really on the A7 because then it just fires the shutter once. This is a nice feature. You can set the exposure compensation to just the ambient and the flash, so when you do exposure compensation it'll also dial down the flash, or just the ambient, which is really neat because most cameras they do both, and then you have to dial the flash up if you want to, whereas this you could set it so it just affects the ambient light. Bracketing order, face recognition, so this is the registration, sorry, so this is where you register your family's faces. APS-C capture, so if you put an APS-C lens on, it'll do auto crop down to 10 megapixels. Micro adjust for DSLR lenses if you're using the Sony adapters. And lens compensation, this is handy if you want to. If you put manual lenses on, you can change your various, well, they call it shading compensation, but it's vignetting basically. And chromatic aberration, and there is a distortion, but again, not quite sure why it's greyed out there. Finally, function menu. This is, if you press the function button, you get all these different options come up on screen. It's a bit like a quick menu, and you've got the upper row and the bottom row, and you can decide what you want on there. I'll just show you that if I press the function, so you have the various options there. It's a bit like the Fuji quick menu. And custom key settings, so we can change all these dials here. You can change each one of these points, you can change the wheel. And you've got one customizable button here, two here, and one on the top here. Oh, and this one here, so you have two on this one, so when that's on AF/MF, you have the button in the middle does this job here, which is AF on, and when you switch it to AEL, it does this option here. You can set the dials, so the f-stop's on the front dial around here and the shutter speed is on the back, or you can switch it to the other way around. What I'd like to see is, say you're in aperture priority mode, the f-stop on the front and something like the ISO on the back button, because you've got exposure compensation. You can actually set one of these to exposure compensation, but it seems pointless when you've got a dedicated dial. So I'd like to see that on ISO. So yeah, see, you can set one of the dials here to exposure compensation, but it kind of seems a bit pointless. It's almost like Sony have pulled this option off another camera and forgotten to delete it because they've put a dedicated dial on this. The movie button, I know some people hit it by mistake. It's right around on the corner here now. Actually, this Sony, if I just grip it there, is one of the best. You can see my fingers don't get in the way of any of the buttons. It's one of the best for not actually hitting buttons, this camera. The only awkwardness is this shut button here. You've got to bend your finger right backwards to it. It'd be much nicer if it was on the front there, so it was a bit more natural. So we can lock this dial here. So that's probably the only one you're likely to knock if you're going to knock anything. Okay, I'm not going to go through all these now, but you can connect to your Wi-Fi network and download apps. There is sort of a basic browser in there, but don't expect to be checking your email on it. These are the applications that I've downloaded. Oh, direct upload, we can upload straight if you're connected to a Wi-Fi point. We can send these images. You can see there it's okay. How do I do this? Next. So we can send them to Facebook or Flickr. That's straight from the camera. It's actually connected to my Wi-Fi network here now. Or you can send it to the Play Memories. I'm sure in the future Sony will be adding more options to this. We have to exit the application. One thing I found that's quite nice about this is if I have it in Smart Remote Control, if I turn the camera off, the application is actually persistent, so when you turn the camera back on it stays in the Smart Remote Control, which I actually find quite handy. So you've got your normal playback menus. I'm not going to go through them all here. You set it to rotate the image. As you rotate the camera, it'll switch it in the display so you see more of it. You can send a 4K still through HDMI if you've got 4K television. and then as I said, the suitcase menu, or whatever it's supposed to be. So these are all the settings for the actual camera rather than shooting settings. And there's quite a few in there. So I'm not going to go through all of these because most of them are fairly self-explanatory. Okay, that's the menus. Right. Playback here, we have various different display options for playback. The clean one, you can see all your settings, or you've got the histograms, and the histograms are split up into red, green, blue. You can see all your settings here, including what mode you used. One of the frustrations here is, instead of, I would expect, because this has got a little plus magnifier here, that you could zoom straight in with this, but you can't. You've got to hit the C2 button and then zoom in and out. Why they'd make it, why they'd add an extra layer of complication, I don't know. One thing I do like is you can zoom into a ridiculous, that's it. You can zoom in ridiculously close, so you can actually see really critical focus on it, which is really handy. The Fuji zoom in, it'll zoom into about there, perhaps there I think it is, before it stops. But this, you can really go the extra mile, and it is handy. On a small screen it is quite difficult to see critical focus sometimes, so that's really nice to see in camera. A lot of these buttons replicate what we've seen in the menu already. You can get to them quickly. Function button, so we can change all the settings in here. If you just rotate the dial, it'll automatically change them. So you can see I like the fact that you have all these intermediate options, because a lot of them don't have that. Set it back to auto. Drive mode, this is, you can customize all these. In the focus area, if we go into there, you can set it in there, and then it'll ask you to set the point you want. Creative styles, which again are those black and white, sepia, everything like that. Exposure compensation, I don't know why they have these in here. Because you've got the dedicated dial, it seems a bit pointless. I've shown you the white balance, and if you press it again you can go over and change it to custom. I think that just about wraps up all the menu options and the buttons here. I'll just go around a few of the physical things. The SD card slots here, which I find is fantastic because you don't have to mess about when you're on a tripod. There's no getting in the way of any of the plates or anything, and it's just handy. I still keep going for it in the battery compartment because that's where I'm used to it. Battery life, as people have said, it's not amazing, but it does use the NEX batteries, so if you're a big NEX user, I really like that. I appreciate that they keep the same batteries, because so many manufacturers use different batteries, and to be honest, the battery is light, it's small. What is the problem with carrying 2 or 3 spares? You might go through 2 a day. It depends how heavily you use it really. If you leave it turned on constantly, it will drain. It's got a big sensor which needs a big processor. It's got a good bright screen and a viewfinder, and both are on all the time because they're on live view. So yeah, it will go through the battery. But that's life, isn't it? If you want a bigger battery, you need a bigger camera, don't you? So it's all about compromises. Right, I think I'll just take it off the stand now and just go through, show you some of the dials on the other sides, and then we'll wrap this up. Right, so here's the top plate of the Sony. You can see you've got your idiot dial here, PASM. You've also got your custom modes, which, because there's so many options on this camera, I actually find them quite handy. I've never really used them a great deal before. You've got your video mode, panorama mode, direct on the dial, which I quite like to do panoramas, so it's handy to have on there. Scene modes and auto mode. And now you might think auto is really stupid, but if you're just doing something quick, it's actually quite handy. And for people who don't want to mess about, people who want to buy a camera with amazing image quality, small size, but don't know that much about photography, The auto mode on this works brilliantly. Your on off button, as I said before, the shutter button is a little bit wobbly. You can't really, it's not got a lot of feel to it, so you can't tell really where half press is. You've got the front dial on here and the back dial here. Dedicated exposure compensation and a customized button there. Come around to the front, I've got the kit lens on it here. Just pop that off so you can appreciate just how big this sensor is. They've only just squeezed it in there, haven't they? Nice. Got your SD slot, Wi-Fi, NFC, movie record button you can see is right round on the side there, so when you're holding it there's no way you can press it by mistake. This side we have HDMI and the multi-charging socket. The light for the charger is, I don't know if you can see it here, is just there, so if you can't find that, which I couldn't find to start with, it's hiding in there. And you've got your microphone in, headphones out for monitoring there. This is supposed to be weather sealed, but I don't think there's a huge amount of weather sealing in here. I mean, these have small rubber seals, but they're nothing serious. And this lens is supposed to be weather sealed, but I can't see on there any rubber seals as you would get on the Nikons, for example. So I don't know if they're just assuming that because it's so tight the water's not going to go between it, but we'd have to see on that one. We've got the tilting screen which goes vertical and down to about that sort of angle. The viewfinder is auto on off viewfinder, tiny delay but nothing that's going to cause any serious concern. There's a diopter on here, and the hot shoe has the Sony multi-port on there, so you can plug in their TTL flashes, XLR audio inputs and various accessories. On the bottom we have the tripod socket, which is right in the middle and out the way of the battery compartment, so if you put a plate on here it doesn't cover up the battery. Got your standard NEX FW50 battery. All feels nice. I mean, it feels good quality. It's not amazing, it's not as solid as my Fuji's, but you know, it doesn't feel like it's going to drop to pieces any minute. Yeah, very small as well. Apart from the grip, but the grip is just fits nicely around the hand. So the only thing that's ergonomically wrong is that shutter button there, which you have to pull right back for with your finger, whereas if it was down here it would be just in the right place. Why they decided to put it there, I'm not sure. Yeah, that I think that wraps it up for my Sony A7, and I'll let you get on because this went on far too long, simply because there's a lot of options on this camera. So I'll say goodbye, and thank you very much for watching.